Hi, everybody, and welcome to Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium here in Annapolis. Pete Medhurst and Bill Wagner for another edition of the Gridiron Review. Bill, this place is going to be rocking on Saturday with Navy and East Carolina. They've played tremendous games this decade during the triple option era, but certainly for our high school teams, as we often start off with, when you take an overview of the first 2 weeks of the season, you try not to think too much of teams, you try not to think too less of teams, but clearly one thing is for certain. We had heard the rumors about Annapolis. They have proven to be true. Old Mill, good again with David Morocco returning, another quality performance there. Arundel has run the ball as advertised through the first couple of weeks. And in the private school ranks, Severn, a huge win against St. Paul's, which I know is a big boom to their program, and Spalding wins the local rivalry with St. Mary's. But you look at the overall aspect of things, and, you know, things have been pretty much according to Hoyle here early in the season.
Except for the fact that Broadneck was upset by South River in the season opener. I think that was a bit of a surprise. So we're still curious as to whether Broadneck is Broadneck. Last year they had undefeated regular season. No one expected them to lose to South River right off the bat, and South River has been a bit of a pleasant surprise for Coach Dolch and his crew. Interesting point that Coach Dolch made. He was hired very late in the process, and he didn't have an off-season with his team. So he had a full off-season to work with his team to make sure that they did their off-season workouts, etc. And it's proven to really have helped the program, and they're 2-0 going into a pretty big matchup this week. And then Meade is another program that's been somewhat of a disappointment so far. 0-2, lost to Chesapeake this past week. Albert Jones has gone from North County over to Meade, maybe changing some things with the program, but Meade was a very strong program under Rich Holzer, who is now at Mount St. Joseph, and 0-2 start has got to be disappointing for the Mustangs.
Well, and I think, too, I mean, they've tried to completely change the philosophy of the program offensively. They went from a team that would spread you out with the athletes that they had, now trying to play more of a power game, and it just hasn't worked out for them. Losing to Chesapeake this week by a count of 22-19. Rashawn Shields to Neil Norris III for the winner in that one. But as we've talked about with Rob Elliott too, Rob took over the feeder program for Chesapeake, and since then they have really started to play much more competitive football at the high school level, and this is as big a win for this program. It remains to be seen what Meade's record will be at the end of the year, but this is a sizable win for this Chesapeake program.
Well, there is an opportunity for Chesapeake and Annapolis, or maybe even South River, let's not discount them, but somebody is going to jump in the echelon here. We've always had Old Mill and Arundel, Broadneck, and then Meade.
Right.
In that kind of, those four have always been up here in the last few years. Somebody, be it Chesapeake with Coach Elliott, who has done a terrific job, as you mentioned, Pete, working with the youth program, as we've talked about many times, to build some consistency. Nick Good-Malloy, giving Annapolis some continuity at the head coaching position. Clearly, Annapolis is a much better program. And South River, one of these schools is going to make a jump and be in playoff contention, in my opinion, this year.
Yeah, because it certainly North Point had a tough game this past week, winning 7-0. So that's one of their few tough games out of the way. So you have to put the Eagles into the equation from Charles County. So that means somebody that's going to end up in that 7-3 mark area is probably going to get left out of the playoffs again. South River been huge. Brooks Watson, 3 touchdowns in the 21-7 win over Severna Park. But Annapolis, they have really served notice these first 2 weeks. They blasted Meade in week 1, beat Southern last week up 46-10 at the break. Omar White with an 80-yard touchdown among their scores in a 60-17 victory. We often expect, and the community expects, the Panthers to always be there. We know the kind of athletes that they have in the community, and it looks as if finally they have cycled back into the right kind of athletes that Nick Good-Malloy and his staff have been able to get off to a great start here.
Well, Nick Good-Malloy has restored Panther pride, and part of it involved going back to running, the wing tee like Roy Brown and his predecessor Al Larimore, the great Al Larimore, did. And they're trying to get back to playing Annapolis football, which is simple. Run the ball, pass it when you know, on occasion to keep teams honest, play solid defense, and they've got some good athletes. Monteez Davis is a tremendous football player, and so you know, Annapolis, I think, this could be they have a big game this week, which will tell a lot about where things are going. But I like Annapolis, and they're playing good football. And you know what's going to happen in Annapolis? If you do restore that Panther pride and start winning, a lot of these kids that are getting plucked away by the private schools, be it St. Mary's or Spalding, that are or even out of county, DeMatha, et cetera, coming into PAL and other youth programs and plucking good players away, they're going to go to Annapolis if they see a winning program, and things will steamroll.
Larry Barnes with 131 yards for Arundel and a 46-6 win over North County. Broadneck bounced back with a big win over Northeast, 52-0. Emmett Davis threw for 2, ran for 3 in that one for the Bruins. And Bill, in the private school ranks, Mason Pung getting Severn rolling with 2 touchdown passes, a 24-9 win over St. Paul's. It's a big win on many accounts. It gets Severn some early momentum, but it comes at the expense of a St. Paul's team, which has really been the class of the B conference the last couple of years.
I'll admit it. Well, as soon as I saw that matchup, our prediction corner that we do at the Capital newspaper that is such a favorite of so many people, I saw Severn St. Paul's and immediately picked St. Paul's because St. Paul's has dominated Severn over the years, as they have dominated many of the teams in that league. Huge win for Severn. They're growing up as a program. Chris Kirchenreiter, the head coach, has been there a while. So again, we talk about continuity, how important it is to have a head coach who stays in one place for a few years. Tyler Perriton, who we talked on the show many a time, very good tailback, very good young player. He's growing up now. He started as a freshman at Severn, and I believe he's now a junior. A very good player. But yes, and you mentioned Emmett Davis, the quarterback at Broadneck. Navy has
offered him.
Navy doesn't offer scholarships, but they have recruiting him, and that's big news for the Davis family. His father, Emmett Davis, is the assistant basketball coach, men's basketball coach at Navy.
And recovering from some health issues as a result of the Annapolis
We wish him the best of luck.
We certainly wish him the best in his recovery. You know, and let's face it, too, the one reality about Severn, it costs a few more shekels to go to Severn than it does any of the other private schools. That's one of the harsh realities of private school athletics. Let's be honest about that. Spalding, Kyle Schmidt doing a nice job there, and they really get the best of St. Mary's. That helps Spalding when they go out to recruit now. 38-0. Josh Chase with 134 on the ground and a score for the Cavaliers. St. Mary's had played well those first couple of games, so I think this result tells you, I think, a little bit more about Spalding and obviously an A-conference team, and they played like it this past weekend.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what Spalding is expected to beat St. Mary's. I don't think St. Mary's expected to lose 38-0. That was a surprise, getting shut out, because St. Mary's had shown a little bit of firepower up until then. But, you know, Spalding did what they were supposed to do. Learning lesson for St. Mary's. I'm sure it taught them, you know, what they're going to have to improve upon as they move into their B conference schedule.
Yeah, DJ Golat had 4 touchdown passes as Annapolis area Christian
He's a good player.
School. Yeah, he's played well for them. And they beat Friends 42-14 this past week. As we mentioned, Old Mill, an easy win this past week. And again, you know, the way the schedule tends to shake out. Last year, remember, it was Old Mill losing the first 2 games before rallying the rest of the season. It appears as if that's not going to be a need for Old Mill here, as they've gotten off to a good start.
Right. Well, you mentioned David Morocco, an outstanding quarterback. Pete Boone, he's like one of these Navy fullbacks that we see, Pete. He's a big boy playing a tailback position at Old Mill, but you're talking about a guy 240 plus back there running the ball. He's hard to bring down. He had a nice game this past week. Old Mill, right now, they look like the class of the county. They're putting up a lot of points.
No doubt about that. And of course, we'll recap, see where everybody is after week number 3, which comes up on Friday night in most places around the county. When we come back, we'll talk about the game that's going to be played here on Saturday, and we'll talk about Bowling Green with a local product coming back to town. He and his Falcons getting the best of Maryland this past week. We'll talk about that when we return on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back to the Gridiron Review. Pete Medhurst, Bill Wagner. We're going to be here on Saturday at Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium. Bill, the last 3 games between the Mids and East Carolina, 76-35, 38-35, 56-28. The Mids have won 2 of the 3 games. It always seems to be high-scoring entertainment. Now it means a whole lot more because both teams are a member of the American Athletic Conference. For the first time in 134 years, Navy is going to play a conference football game here on Saturday. Almost seems like we never thought that would happen, but the landscape of college football has dictated it, and now the Mids get their opportunity on Saturday.
Yeah, it was interesting at the season opener against Colgate to look down on this field right behind us and see two big A's that mark that you are in a conference. Never had that before for Navy. This is a historic moment for the program. As you mentioned, this coming Saturday, a conference game, and this stuff counts now. I mean, before, Navy is an independent. You won, you lost. There was no further repercussions, either a W or an L. Now it has implications for the standings. If you want to be in the American Athletic Conference Championship game, got to win some games. You're right about the scoring between these two schools. It's interesting. Navy has absolutely run the ball down East Carolina's throat in the two meetings in Greenville, but then here in Annapolis, East Carolina got the better of Navy with its passing attack, and who will forget that play right here in this end zone where Matt Aiken, an apparent touchdown catch to win the game, was ruled. What is that ruling, Pete?
It was ruled he did not complete the catch.
It looked like he did to me.
It looked like he did on film, and I think maybe the league had told them that after the game, that perhaps it should have been a catch. But, that's water under the bridge. Last week, East Carolina, great game with Florida. They played very well down at the Swamp against the Gators. You wonder, if you're Navy, you hope they expended some of that energy and left it there in Gainesville. Otherwise, I think we got the makings of a great football game. And, Keenan Reynolds and his offense, they're probably semi-happy about what they did in the first week, but not totally happy, because that first drive, they, to a man, said, hey, that was just bad football from us, and they've got to do better than that, because the one thing we've seen in this rivalry, turnovers have made a huge difference. ECU turned it over like crazy. The Mids put 76 up down in Greenville, and as always, it's the one huge factor seemingly in every football game.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, a 48-10 victory over Colgate in the opener. Navy is expected to beat a football championship subdivision school like Colgate, but as every coach has said to me since then, we've got to play a lot better across the board. Offense, defense, special teams, if we expect to beat East Carolina. A big takeout from the Colgate game, of course, as everyone knows by now. Navy fullbacks ran wild. Starter Chris Swain and his two backups, Quentin Ezel and Sean White, combined for almost 200 yards, 4 touchdowns. It'll be interesting to see. The game plan Colgate came in with was attack Keenan Reynolds, get the ball out of his hands. Well, he handed it to those 3 250-pound fullbacks of his, and that was all she wrote. Now it'll be interesting to see if East Carolina focuses on taking the fullback away, and that would mean it's going to have to be a slot back day or maybe Keenan Reynolds. So it's going to be interesting this year as teams play Navy, what kind of defensive game plan they come up with. But as we know with the triple option, you can try to take away the quarterback, you can try to take away the fullback, or you can try to take away the pitch element. One of the three, or the little passing game, is going to work. And
of course, it takes an incredibly disciplined defense to do that. As UConn did that in some respects to Army last week, winning 22-17. The Mids will play at UConn the following Saturday. Meanwhile, over in College Park, Maryland led 13-6 at halftime. There was a long delay because of weather at halftime, but man, Bowling Green just put it on them in the second half. The local product, Ryan Burbrink, out of Shadyside and DeMatha High School, coming up with a touchdown pass. And Matt Johnson, the quarterback for the Falcons, pretty much did what he wanted in the entire second half. And Maryland's lack of offense, and the only reason I picked Bowling Green in that game was because I just didn't think Maryland could score enough points to stay with Bowling Green. They did well for a half, but that second half, Bowling Green put on a clinic.
Right. Well, in a career day for the quarterback, almost 500 yards passing. Matt Johnson, hell, he was fantastic. Looked like a pro out there. But, who's doing the scheduling at Maryland? Because they need to check the MAC standings. If you're going to go into the Mid-American Athletic
Play Miami of Ohio. They lost 37-0 last week.
These are games that you're scheduling at home to supposedly get a nice, easy win before you go into the rigors of your Big Ten Conference. And somebody at Maryland needs to check the history of the MAC and know that Bowling Green is an outstanding program. They've been a regular bowl participant. We saw them at the Military Bowl here a few years ago. Bowling Green is good. I don't know who would ever have decided to pick Bowling Green of all MAC teams to put on your schedule, but that's a tough loss for Maryland at home, non-conference game that you kind of thought you were supposed to win. Now they got to bounce back against South Florida, an American Athletic Conference school.
Many people thought Caleb Rowe would win the job in the preseason. He did not play well enough to do that, but he will get the start here against South Florida. Not many things for Randy Edsel to do, but I put a lot of this, although, on the Golden Boy too, Mike Loxley.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, he has to put together a plan that one of these quarterbacks can operate. The one great thing, and I mean, I'll draw the comparison at Navy. Ivan Jasper, he's not had the same style of quarterback for the triple option. He's always found a way, though, with every one of those quarterbacks to use something to win games.
He tailors the game to what they do well.
Mike Loxley's got to do that with one of these three quarterbacks that they have, because he's been tabbed as the offensive genius.
Well, you got to wonder, first of all, what did Caleb Rowe do to earn the starting job? He went into the game last week and threw 3 passes, and 2 of them were interceptions. So this seems a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. You went through an entire preseason and determined that Perry Hills is your starting quarterback, and now totally out of the blue, Caleb Rowe is now the starter. They say that Dax Garman is now the backup, and Perry Hills isn't even on the depth chart anymore. So what was going on all preseason? Because it sounds as though after one bad game, they're making major changes based off of what had happened all the way up until that point. So
it was interesting listening to the Maryland radio broadcast. They were kind of freaking out that South Florida was hanging with Florida State in the first half, because they're looking at that going, oh no, now all of a sudden this is a really tough game coming up this Saturday, and it should be in College Park. When we come back, the Redskins and Ravens kick off the NFL season this past week. Neither got the result they were looking for. And, of course, both teams coming out of that game with significant injuries. We'll tell you about those when we return on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back. Ravens and the Denver Broncos locked up in a good one on Sunday. Broncos make enough plays. They intercept Joe Flacco in the end zone to win at 19-13. But, Bill, of course, the biggest news coming out of this game, Terrell Suggs, your energetic guy, your leader on defense, done for the year with a torn Achilles. It will be interesting to see how this team reacts down the road. I think they can get by the Raiders, who suffered significant injuries themselves, with Nate Allen and Charles Woodson likely not playing, and Derek Carr questionable with that bruised thumb. But no Suggs on the defensive side for the Ravens. Over the course of 16 games, that's a crushing injury.
Well, I think the biggest place is leadership. He's a locker room leader, an emotional leader for the team. They probably got other bodies. Courtney Upshaw never played passing downs. Now he's going to get a chance. He's in a contract year, and he's going to get a chance to show
some money.
Yeah, he can show that he can rush the quarterback. He's wanted to do that. Well, now he's going to get his chance. They'll move Elvis Sturmerville over to Suggs' spot, and that's who they'll roll with, and more of a depth issue for them at outside linebacker. But really, the loss of leadership is crucial. And boy, was this a defensive struggle. 2 teams that played outstanding defense. Ravens could not block those 2 outstanding pass rushers of the Denver Broncos, and Joe Flacco really had no time to throw. And I think some of the preseason concerns about does Baltimore have playmakers may have been true, because I did not see wide receivers getting any separation in that game, Pete.
No, and again, opposite Steve Smith, that's why they drafted Rashad Perry. I mean, he hasn't played since the very first
He's in
practice.
witness protection or something. I mean,
that knee just hasn't responded. They still don't think it's a huge deal, but we haven't seen him since the very first practice. With Justin Forsett, he's a guy, he's been a journeyman. Yes, he had a great year last year, but you got to show me again. We got to see it again from a guy in that position. The good news is they get the Raiders. Ironically, they're staying in San Jose this week at the same Hilton Hotel that Navy stayed at while they were out there in San Jose as well, getting meeting rooms, doing walkthroughs inside. And they're going to go practice over at San Jose State this week. But they should be able to bounce back against the Raiders. The Redskins, on the other hand, led 10-0 and just let it get away. And we've seen this movie before. Special teams touchdown by Miami turns out to be a huge difference. And now you go the next couple of weeks, no Dookie and Nacho at safety, no Chris Culliver this week against St. Louis due to suspension. More importantly, your biggest offensive weapon down the field, Deshaun Jackson's out 3 to 4 with a pulled hamstring. Redskins welcoming in a very tough St. Louis team who beat Seattle last week.
Well, the Redskins didn't finish. They moved the ball pretty effectively, piled up some yards, and just couldn't finish in the red zone. They need to score touchdowns, come up with some points. They just left way too many points on the field. Kirk Cousins, I thought, played pretty well. Pete, he threw a couple picks, but we know about Kirk Cousins is going to take chances, going to try to push the ball downfield. Interceptions will probably be part of the equation. I thought he played okay.
Alfred Morris, I thought, was a bright spot with the way they ran the football.
Yeah. And, defensively, they played pretty well. Yeah. They gave up a special teams touchdown. And, Pete, you could coach the special teams of the Redskins better than what these group of coaches have done over the last few years.
Former Army special teams coach Ben Kotwika in charge there.
I just don't understand why the Redskins special teams have been so poor year in and year out, and it's a third of the game. And if you don't think it's important, just look what has happened to the Redskins over the last few years with their special teams blunders. It's just killing them.
Yeah, and they used to be at one point one of the best special teams in the country. And this week, a tough game with St. Louis coming up. I mean, you could be 0-2 and 0-2 at home, which is never a good way to start the campaign.
For those local fans, a guy that's really exciting to watch for St. Louis is Tavon Austin, Dunbar High in Baltimore product. He is really special. Get him the ball in space and look out.
75-yard punt return last week for the Rams, which turned out to be huge in the victory over Seattle. Come back and wrap things up with some youth football news and notes from Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium. Pete Bill with you on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back. Time to talk a little youth football. And Bill, hard to believe here, we're already on week 4 of the youth football season coming up. Had some great games. And the thing about youth football every year is you just don't know where the strengths are going to be and where the weaknesses are going to be in certain divisions. But last week, 70-pound weight class could not have asked for a better week when you talk about Brooklyn Park and Generals Highway, a 31-26 game, a 13-12 game between Powell and Queen Anne's, and those are the littlest guys that we have out there who are just learning how to play youth football. In many cases, yes, it is get your guy to the outside and see how far he can run, but always exciting to see those types of games from those youth footballers, because if they have a good experience at the 70 and 80-pound level, they're going to stick with the sport. And let's face it, the sport right now is under attack more so than it's ever been because of the violence of the sport, the potential injuries of the sport. But those guys, they don't move as fast. They're less likely to be concussed, and it's fun to watch those guys play at that level. But certainly, as the youth football season goes along, and you know, as a parent, you want your kid to have a great experience no matter what sport they're playing. And to see games like that here in the first couple of weeks of the season, got to be very exciting. And, of course, Gork right now, you wonder why Arundel's good? Gork has the premier varsity U team, 53-0. Another win this past week. They look like a group that's going to be unstoppable. Yeah, my son was on a Gork varsity U team that played in the championship game and won right here in Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium. And that's a very valuable level because there are sometimes kids that don't make the junior varsity or they're about to enter high school, and that's at a very important developmental level because it's kind of your last step before whether you're going to make high school football or not. And I know that Arundel has benefited very much from that. You mentioned Generals Highway. That's a relatively new program. Gary Williams, a longtime friend of mine from Annapolis High School, former Annapolis High great lacrosse player, he kind of started the Generals Highway program. I believe he's been the commissioner most of the time. How that's not easy to start a program from scratch, but I'm guessing that corridor of Generals Highway must have needed a program. Well, I mean, I think, again, you look at where they're located, and you could make a case for some of the kids maybe out by Annapolis Small on Defense Highway. Annapolis area. Maybe going that direction. Of course, a lot of those kids out by Corridor Park, they go to Old Mill. Right. That's where they're actually district. I think what's good for them is they're in a very unique position. A lot of kids this year came from a different program, migrating from Brooklyn Park down into their program. But when you look at their addresses, they are closer to Generals Highway than they were Brooklyn Park. So under AAYFA rules, technically, it makes them eligible to go there. It was a big piece of controversy during the off season. But everything is on the up and up, and it's to me, it's always good to see when people start something from scratch and start to see some results from it. And Gary and them certainly finding a need because they're filling teams. I mean,
that's
you look
what
around,
it's all about.
I think one of the more distressing things from a county standpoint, you look at, Southern only had one team that signed up this year. Yeah, that's worrisome. In 12 and under, but they've got kids. They've all just gone down to play in Calvert County. Right. So they've got kids that are playing for the Owings Eagles, or Owings Outlaws rather, the Dunkirk Warriors, the Beach Buccaneers, among many other teams. Some of them are playing at SRYA. Right. Even kids playing at Generals Highway. We saw one of them had signed up there this year. So it's not as if those kids from the neighborhood are not getting there, but it really has to be a warning flare that there was only one team from that organization signing up. SRYA, I think you take a look at the guy Seth Baldwin, who's coaching the JV now at South River. He was a big part of that SRYA youth program. and you can see the youth programs that start to take it seriously. There's no two better examples than Kent Island High School and Queen Anne's High School.
Absolutely.
As soon as they brought their youth feeder programs over here with the Queen Anne's Lions and the Chesapeake Bay Piranhas, Bill, their high school teams have been unstoppable.
Right.
They have dominated the Eastern Shore.
They have benefited.
And they have opened up a cavity that is so wide, even the best dentist couldn't fill it. So, I think that's the biggest thing. They come over here to play the better competition. Their high school teams, as a result, and we talk about the Gork program through the years with Arundel. You look at Old Mill's program through the years, feeding into Old Mill. General's Highways program now feeding into Old Mill and even parts of Annapolis. So I think you're going to see those high school programs continue to stay strong that have these great feeder programs.
Absolutely.
That'll do it for our program this week. As always, we appreciate you joining us. You can get your youth football schedules by going to aacounty.org, click on Recreation and Parks, and hit the team schedules. You'll find the football menu right there. Going out and watch a youth football game this weekend. I know the kids would love to have your support. Bill and I will be back here on Saturday for Navy and East Carolina. We'll wrap it up for you next week right here on the next edition of the Gridiron Review.